No one really wants to shop in the same places as their parents. It is uncool. We might want the same stuff, but it is uncool. And I think it's good to see that, if you like, these sort of offshoots, the children of Starbucks and Costa and Nero's are beginning to spring up and are actually giving their parents a run for their money.
You're listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, brought to you by Global Convenience Store Focus, featuring senior retail executives and experts in the global convenience, fuels, and mobility retail industry. Hosted by Dan Munford, Nick Scherzer, and Carolyn Schnare. Welcome to the Future of Convenience podcast. I'm Carolyn Schnare, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dan Munford. Hey, Dan.
Hello, Carolyn. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite cities in the whole wide world, which is London. And I haven't actually been there in a while. So I'll have to come back for a visit one of these days. But we're going to talk a little bit about the retail landscape, past, present, and future. Before we get started, I want to tell you about a Dan refrigeration. Ready to revolutionize your convenience store kitchen? Look no further than a Dan refrigeration. With a Dan innovative patented technology, you'll enjoy a dramatic reduction in energy consumption compared to traditional refrigeration units. A Dan drawers offer large capacity and stackability, allowing you to optimize every inch of your storage area and maintain consistent, precise temperatures. Choose a Dan refrigeration for unmatched efficiency and performance made for your convenience. Visit danday.com to learn more. Now, Dan, I mentioned we're talking a little bit about London, but I didn't mention that we're going to be talking to one of our newest colleagues about it all. Would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, and this obviously is very connected to London, actually, and we'll explain more in a minute about that. But I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Anthony Wysome. Anthony Wysome has recently joined Insight Research and is working with us, and brings a wealth of retail experience, major UK multiple retail experience, and also experience with Costa Coffee over many years in his CV. So we're already working with Anthony, and welcome very much to Future of Convenience podcast, Anthony.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks.
So Anthony, it's great to be talking to you here today. Give us a bit of background on your time with the UK major multiples, and firstly, tell us a bit. Waitrose was the retail business you spent most time with, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. I think I grew up at Sainsbury's, so did 10 or 11 years from a graduate at Sainsbury's, and that kind of gave me the grounding in initially commercial and then strategy and finance. Really built on my early retail experiences working in fuel stations and behind bars and all that kind of stuff. And what that actually meant was that I kind of became a generalist pretty early on. I'd met most bits of the inside of a supermarket business, and led on via one or two places to a pretty long stint at Waitrose. Initially setting up formats, so I joined Waitrose to deliver their food hall that they wanted to create and build in Oxford Street, in John Lewis Oxford Street. And from there, I then spent several years effectively creating and then testing their convenience business, which became Little Waitrose.
And that's where we met, isn't it? Because that was about 15 years ago.
That was almost exactly 15 years ago, yes. So I think we got our first store open towards the end of 2009.
And that was the Little Waitrose format, which made a big splash at the time, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Waitrose was fairly late into convenience relative to some of the other multiples here, which meant, frankly, we had to try harder. We had to do more for the customer and really make sure that a lot of the traditional Waitrose credentials came over in a much smaller
And I was
space.
knocking on the door to say, Anthony, can we bring some global retailers to come and look at the Little Waitrose format when we're in London? And you very kindly at the time said yes.
This is true. And you were, as you tend to be, you were fairly nice about it, as I seem to recall.
Yes. So you did a lot of work at Waitrose, as you said, you also introduced some new. It wasn't just formats, was it? Well, tell us about some of the other things you did at Waitrose.
Yeah, I think after setting up convenience and once that business unit kind of got scaled up and sort of ran it, handed over, I I took over the sort of the broader store development and format development function. And yeah, by this time you really like to find new stuff and roll with it. We had great success looking for really profitable additions to this kind of core supermarket format that could initially work in maybe a small proportion of our stores and then scale forward. So sushi was a big one at the time. We were the first supermarket to bring in sushi counters, and that's been, I think, one of the most successful things that Waitrose has put in over the last 10 or 15 years.
Well done to you, and well done to Waitrose for giving you that opportunity. And then you spent some time with Costa Coffee as well, didn't you?
More recently, yes. Yeah, so I led the global sort of design and development of the Costa format. We did that. It was quite an interesting job because it was global, and for the first year I couldn't actually leave my house due to lockdown. But actually, yeah, we did a lot of work in the Middle East, a lot of work in China, beginning to just take what's a relatively, people forget it, but it's a sort of 30-year-old format now. And if you're launching that in a new city somewhere else in the world, clearly what was right for London 30 years ago may not be right for there now. So we had a lot of work to do there.
Well, pleasure to be working with you. And Carolyn, you Anthony and I were in London last week. You must have seen some of the posts.
Oh yeah, that again making me jealous. I'd love to go back. And but yeah, that you guys look like you had a great trip. You saw several different retailers in the area, and I would have to imagine they've changed a little bit, like you said, not only since 15 years ago, but when was COVID? 4 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we really, what we did last week. So it was a pleasure, first of all, to work with you, Anthony, and I think we both enjoyed it, and we had a great group along with us, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
But really, I mean, it was quite, Carolyn. It was, I mean, to your question, it was quite an interesting deep dive into certain retailers. We didn't cover everybody. It wasn't as like we tried to cover the whole London market, but we had a very deep dive with Marks and Spencers, which obviously was a big privilege. I mean, I think they're knocking it out of the park at the moment. Incredibly buoyant, confident business, from a culture point of view and a results point of view, and we spent a good few hours with them in a round table as well as store visits. We had another very interesting deep dive into Cavanaugh's Belsize Park, one of the big brands in the market from an innovation point of view. That one
sure.
store.
Yeah, and I think. Well, I mean, they told us how many times they've been visited, and I think that's testimony to what happens when you actually produce a really interesting piece of food retail in or around London.
And the third business that we deep dive in was Roasting Plant. Tell us why you like Roasting Plant, Anthony.
I really like Roasting Plant. They're not the only kind of new entrant or relatively recent entrant into the coffee market who's clearly targeting a share of that business, which is still dominated by 3 or 4 very big players. And it's great to see some of these new guys coming in with something different. So to be able to go into Roasting Plant and really for them to be able to put across their particular point of difference, which is the fact that the product is roasted there and then, that the freshness of the product and the taste profile of the product is very much improved on what they see elsewhere in the market, is fantastic. There are others who are in that market as well. We saw Blank Street the day before, for example, who also are chipping away at that market, but in a different way, where they're aiming much more at a younger market, and they're using their digital format particularly well. And I just think that's really interesting. No one really wants to shop in the same places as their parents, and these are the
that's very true, isn't it, Carolyn? Does that point make sense to you?
We might want the same stuff.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it just makes it uncool, right?
It is uncool. We might want the same stuff, but it is uncool. And I think it's good to see that the if you like, these sort of offshoots, the children of Starbucks and Costa and Nero's, are beginning to spring up and are actually giving their parents a run for their money.
Well, I'm just glad you got away from tea a little bit over there, and you're finally adopting the love of coffee like the rest of us in the planet.
Specialty coffee, Carolyn, which I think you'll find that the Americans could drink more of.
Yes, that's true. Cheers to that.
So just thinking about the other thing, Anthony, that you've done, which has got a lot of attention, is we've talked to you about sort of developing some ideas, particularly around the UK and London market, and writing about it. And we've published 2 articles that you wrote on the new Insight Research website, and also obviously promoted them in social media. Had a huge traction on those on LinkedIn. And tell us a bit about the perhaps starting off with the retail evolution in that you're seeing in the London market. And obviously, we had a view of some of that last week. But tell us about your views on retail evolution.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's plenty. Between us, we have plenty of views on where this could go, and the nice thing is you're never sure if you're going to be right. But I think this particular article builds on a theme that I think we'll keep coming back to, which is the sort of what kind of physical size and presence actually matters these days. I think those of us that have been in the industry for 20 or 30 years have witnessed the large get larger. I mean, there's been brutal efficiency as supermarkets and discounters and cafe chains and QSRs have grown and expanded right across the globe. And that's not going anywhere. But I think what's interesting is these days that you have businesses which haven't got, at the moment, for one reason or another, a huge number of sites. They just have a lot more choices about how they grow. They don't need to do it physically through CapEx. They can do it across a mix of channels. But once you've decided to go across a mix of channels, you actually want your store to be the very best place to land and market your brand. And that's what we're beginning to see, I think, more and more. And that's great. I mean, I love that because it means that you have places like Grind and Roasting Plant who have cooler, more interesting stores because they want us to remember that experience and buy that brand direct or online. Gales want us to remember what it feels like in a Gales coffee shop when we're buying a loaf of bread in Waitrose. And I think these things give the smaller guys more routes to scale and profit and have the lovely byproduct of creating a lovely looking high street.
I mean, you wrote a very good article about evolution, but just thinking about evolution, and we walked into Gales, and you and I know Gales, we've breakfast, lunched in there many times. Obviously, some members of the group, that was their first time, and they loved Gales, didn't they? And then we took them around the corner, and Gales is a great business, isn't it? I mean, it's one of the phenomenal businesses that's growing fastest in the UK market, outside London as well now. But then so they're getting a lot of stuff much more right than anybody else at the moment. But in that particular space, in the perhaps the breakfast space, bakery space. But then we walked around the corner, didn't we? And we tried this bakery that we've, in fact. You'd heard about it. My daughter Phoebe told me about it through Instagram because she's been seeing it on Instagram, which is Fortitude Bakehouse.
Yes. Well, you have to save something special for a retail trip, don't you? So, and that's exactly what we did. And I think that what was lovely about that was Fortitude is a bakery. It's a bakery that, and you see you have the whole bakery on display, and you then buy it, and there is nothing to get in the way of that absolute experience. And what I really liked with our group last week was that we had senior retailers who really got a lot out of the strategic side of retail. We really were able to dive in with M&S or with Fusion and understand a lot about the practicalities of where our business is going. But actually, we're nearly all a retail romantic at heart. When you actually just stand in a Fortitude or a roasting plant and have your particular coffee beans ground, actually, that's a great moment of retail joy, and it was nice that we were able to have that alongside it.
I'm telling you, Carolyn, you really missed out not being there, because we'd been eating all morning, and I thought, well, nobody's going to have any room left for Fortitude Bakehouse, and I was so wrong.
You make room for a trip like that, right?
Well, yeah, there were a few items taken home at the end of the day, weren't there? There was no doubt about that. There was some other people.
There was some big exports to Ireland in particular, I noticed. But yeah, and so there's exciting retail evolution happening in London. It's not everywhere, though, is it? I mean, some retailers are choosing not to evolve that much.
Yes. They would speak for themselves on whether they're choosing to or whether they're struggling to. But I think once you're of a certain size and you've got lots and lots of units, it's that any change you make is going to be a long haul to get it through your entire business. And I think we heard it firsthand last week. There's still a huge, the overwhelming focus is on efficiency, productivity, coping with the challenges of labour, and you would expect that. But actually, what was lovely was that the counterpoint was there as well, and that you can see where actually I think the market is ripe for the smaller and the individual, and those that have got new ways of growing to add, frankly, the colour which those other guys are not going to be able to.
One of the things that sorry, Carolyn, go ahead.
Oh, Anthony, what I was going to ask was in the article we had posted up on our website, Global Convenience Store Focus, you did talk about breakfast, and to continue on with the conversation that we're going with that, you mentioned, you actually listed out some of the, not without naming names, between stale, which I don't know if that was a reference to bread, but it really worked out well, especially pastries, but stale to I don't know, thriving, I think was like your middle word, to like excelling in terms of like going back to the not your parents' store kind of thing. Yeah. So based on what you're saying here, it sounds like you got to tour all of those versions.
Pretty much. Yeah, and that was the point. The point, as you say, that we were able to take a bit of a generational view, and for those of us who've got smaller children who already think we're ancient, I think the same applied for the stores. For me, there are businesses that could remain nameless, but they're pretty big and can look after themselves. Pret a Manger or Starbucks are 30 to 40 years old in London now, and they were, to me, when I was in my teens and 20s, staggeringly cool, and I don't think they describe themselves as staggeringly cool these days. And so it's really interesting to see them, and as you say, they may still be the best overall proposition for what the customer wants, but actually it's great when the newer guys are taking a slightly different tack. And I think breakfast is a really interesting one, because you've got some trends which have only really appeared. I mean, the post-COVID working patterns has a huge impact on when people can meet in London and when that suits them, and that's fascinating. The relative non-consumption of alcohol by a really considerable proportion of the population now, again, I think sort of democratizes which meal you go out on. I mean, my favorite drug of choice is caffeine. So actually, if I want a drink that has a drug in, I'm going to have it at breakfast rather than in the evening. And so I think those things just create opportunity. And once people are taking maybe some spend out of the evening and putting it into their daytime occasions, which I think is very much what we saw last week, then you've got something to play with. And I personally think there are some great future breakfast opportunities still available.
Absolutely. Well, look, Anthony, I could listen to you talking about retail all day. You've got such a great retail brain, as you're realizing, Carolyn. But obviously, we will have more opportunities to do that on the road, Carolyn, won't we? What have you got planned on your side of the pond?
Well, actually, prior to the annual NAC show that a lot of our industry friends come over here to the U.S. for, we're going to be going to Pennsylvania, which is right outside Philadelphia on the East Coast of the United States. But we're going to see some of the juggernauts of U.S. convenience, Sheetz and Wawa and Rutter's, who are well known around the globe, not only for their convenience, but because they come over and they join us too on some of our tours, which is where they get their ideas globally. So we're gonna hopefully bring you guys all over here, and by you guys I mean all your listeners, and you, Dan and Anthony too. If you're welcome to join us. Come over to the U.S. We're going to be in Philadelphia. That's in early October. So we're going to put some of that on the website and hopefully get tons of attendees. Come join me. It's always fun.
Well, very good. I think that's always a very exciting trip with those brands, because they're doing things in a very unique way, and incredibly successful businesses. The week after that, something that Nick and I have been working on is a focus on the Spanish market. Will be with Repsol, Cepsa, and Galp in Madrid ahead of Forecourt Tech. So we're doing a market focus Madrid, which hones in on some really exciting developments in that market from those very innovative businesses who are all doing some exciting stuff. So we've got that to look forward to as well, just after the NAC show. That's coming up ahead of Forecourt Tech, who we're working closely with. I went to the event for the first time last year. They very kindly asked me to speak, and it's a really successful event, very well attended. So we're pleased to be working with them ahead of Forecourt Tech, and with those great Spanish brands. So yeah, looking forward to that. We've got an exciting year ahead of us, guys, haven't we?
Sure.
That's for sure. And Dan, we can find, I think we would be doing a disservice not to put some more of those photos up. I know on your LinkedIn page and on the Global Convenience Store Focus LinkedIn pages, we have tons of the photos from the London tour. And we'll add some to the article about this podcast when it comes out, so that everybody listening can take a real good look at what we're talking about, including those wonderful breakfast pastries you keep talking about. You always leave me hungry on this show. I'm always, I just, and where I am, it is breakfast time, so I'm starving.
We have got to take you to that bakery when we're next together in London.
That sounds like a plan. Well, Dan, Anthony, it's been wonderful talking with you today, and I hope to do more of this. I hope to see more of you guys. And in the meantime, thank you for listening to The Future of Convenience. You've been listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, produced by Dan Munford, Nick Scherzer, Jenna Ferguson, and Lorraine Evans. It is produced, edited, and mixed by Carolyn Schnare, and music is provided by Jukebox Music. Tune in every other Friday for new episodes, and please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Learn more at globalconveniencestoreFocus.co.uk.